So if you're feeling like the selection from Ruth feels familiar, you are indeed right. The text appears in the lectionary just a month ago, and yet has been chosen to appear in this theme material this week as well, as a story that reminds us what family means as we prepare our hearts and selves for Christ's entry once more on Christmas. A crucial understanding for many theologians over the years has been the adoptive nature of God's relationship with humanity, and toward an understanding of that kind of love that makes a family from whoever walks with you. The story of Ruth speaks to the determination and journeying through the hard times that will become important for the life of Jesus later on. Ruth is also, we must remember, one of only 4 women listed in that long line of genealogy, all those begats in that one version, right? At the beginning of Matthew. Ruth, who's an outsider to Jerusalem. Ruth, the Moabite who begs to stay with Naomi. Ruth, along with Tamar and Rahab and Bathsheba, who are included in that list of lineage. All who have compelling and troubled backstories for the Hebrew people. It is through these incredible ancestors that Jesus' father, Joseph, descends. Joseph, who takes Jesus as his own and vows to raise him. Through this history of inclusion of family by love, not genes, does Jesus come into the world as a descendant of King David, a child of a triad parentage, Mary, Joseph, and God's grace. Ruth's story is, of course, compelling in itself. But as a part of the Advent season of preparation, Ruth encourages us to take a closer look at all those invested in the journey that brings us to Jesus, that creates physical and emotional space for God to appear, to enter human life. From a history of saying, I will stand with you, Jesus enters our existence. From such a beginning, a new vision of what it means to be free and what the rule of faith might encourage is born. From I will go with you, I will die with you, I will travel with you. On second reading, our second reading highlights this 3-stranded rope as a marker of strength. 3 strands, not 2. Though the surrounding selection is about how 2 are stronger and warmer and better than 1, it suddenly ends with 3. And when I look at that, I remember how much of the story of Ruth is told in triads. Ruth, who is sister-in-law to Orpah, and approaches Naomi as the 2 of them. In a retelling of the story by our theme creators, Reverend Anna Strickland, you can hear our introduction this way. Naomi was folding the last of her things when she heard a knock. In the doorway stood Orpah and Ruth, her sons' widows. Bless them, thought Naomi. Even after they lost their husbands, they had stuck around to help out the aging in-law. It didn't matter that they were from different countries, with different traditions and different religions. These were Naomi's girls. Orpah and Ruth came into the room and sat on Naomi's bed next to the suitcase. Though Orpah chooses to return to her family of origin, she is part of that beginning 3-stranded rope of strength to endure harsh times ahead. Yet when she does leave, Naomi and Ruth are not left alone at 2 either, for they both seek God's providence and protection in their path forward to seek and make a way. On this 3rd strand of rope, they put their expectation or hope of future security. Together, they bind themselves with the divine in their partnership to make the journey into the unknown. In your bulletins today, or if you're using the web, included in there is one of the art selections from our Advent devotional that goes with this week's text. An interpretation of Ruth and Naomi's connected three-stranded rope in binding braids by Nicolette Peñaradan. The artist has said this of the piece: I invite you to bring it out and turn your paper over, to turn it around and around, to get close to it, to take a closer look, and to engage this piece deeper while imagining this world. When I was a child, my mother used to give my older sister and I this unibraid down our backs. She was never particularly good at doing our hair. We always had flyaways and little bits of frizz at our edges, accompanied by our big bright smiles on picture day. I always wondered why my braid was never smooth and long like hers. It wasn't long until I started braiding my own hair. At the tender age of 9, I would spend hours in the bathroom staring at myself in the mirror with 2 hands to heaven. Braids would become a staple in my hair care routine. The more I did my own, the more I noticed others' braids as well. I would learn to appreciate our shared kinship, our braids, our ancestors, our heritage, and our culture. Our designs were our creativity and our individuality. Braids bind us in ways that go beyond the physical. We are forever entwined. Ruth and Naomi find themselves bound by their widowhood and familial grief. And while Orpah made the choice to return to her village, Ruth bound herself to her mother-in-law. Where you go, I will go. They too have spiritual connections that are deeper than the surface. The two of them are connected through a simple braid. They're also reaching for each other from opposing sides of the braid in the middle of the canvas, which you might have to break our little barrier there to get it back together. In the binding of the braids, Naomi, embodied by purples, yellows, and greens, is connected to Ruth, filled with blues, oranges, and greens, inseparably. While purple is most often associated with royalty, it's meant here to hold her grief. The deep color reflects her processing the loss of both of her sons and husband, while the contrast of the yellows and gold represent the glimmers of hope she finds in companionship with Ruth. While she is surrounded by whimsical patterns and clouds, Naomi's portrait stands distinct from her surroundings. Her chest holds a subtle landscape detailing her and Ruth holding hands while journeying back to Naomi's native land. In contrast, whereas Naomi's portrait holds grief and duality, Ruth's color palette is meant to feel more hopeful and vibrant, like she puts on a brave face for Naomi when she pledges her allegiance to her mother-in-law. As you study the image, take a deeper look. What parts of the image are your eyes drawn most to? What parts of the image did you quickly brush by or overlook? We are invited to use our imaginations to feel ourselves a part of this piece. Who would you be? How would you interact with what surrounds you? What emotions might they have? Might you have among them? In the story of Ruth, there is a heavy emphasis on trust. Going through life on faith built by relationships with one another, but also on trusting that you can continue to move along, that the movement will be in a positive direction. Through everything Naomi has been through, there is somehow something good through all the trouble. In the move to Moab because of famine, she still had her husband and sons to be together. Through the death of her husband, there is the constancy of her sons. In their untimely deaths, the presence and compassion of daughter-in-laws, and a report that life was no longer impossible back home. There seems to always be a silver lining, a hook to hold on to, even in swirling times. The artist spoke in her artist statement of the flyaways of her braid when her mother lovingly worked on her hair. There will always be pieces that just don't sit right. If you've ever braided hair, you know that. Or pieces that don't flow with how we expect our lives to go, as there was for Naomi and as there is for us too. There is also that strong 3-stranded unibraid of life held in place to comfort us. In every biblical story, there is a thread, a rope, a braid holding them together. Relationship, because we can't go alone. Because God has adopted humanity into divine family. Because family is more than who carries your genes. Family is who holds you when you cry in grief. Family is who braids your hair, whether they're good or not. Who takes your hand and says, "Where you go, I will go." Family is a father to an unexpected, out-of-marriage child born to a migrant in Bethlehem. Family is God who calls all of these people into new lives to show us that we can be stronger if we connect our history and our vision, overlapping our strengths, holding on and saying yes to the journey. Naomi knew there was no convincing Ruth to stay behind. Anna Strickland's retelling says, who was she to say no? Hadn't she done the same 30 years ago, moving to a strange country? Anyway, it would be nice to have some company for the journey, even if Ruth changed her mind later. All right, baby girl, pack your things. We have a long road ahead of us. Strickland's Naomi relates to Ruth and welcomes the long road ahead. May our long road ahead be one that allows all of us here to find the braided strength to share great compassion on the way. All right, babies, let's go. Amen.